Victoria Hale stood at the edge of the frozen lake, watching a single father kneel in the snow with his daughter, teaching her how to carve wood. She didn't know his name yet. She didn't know that in 6 months, her ex-fiancé would leak photos of that little girl online to destroy them both. She didn't know she'd walk away from a billion-dollar empire to protect them. She only knew one thing. For the first time in her adult life, she wanted something money couldn't buy. This is the story of how a tech billionaire and a mountain carpenter built something the world tried to tear apart. Stay until the end, and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The first time Ethan Calloway considered throwing his phone into the lake was approximately 4 minutes into the worst blind date of his life. He sat in the corner booth of the Lakeside Grill, a restaurant so aggressively upscale that the menu didn't list prices, and the waiter had introduced himself with the kind of reverence usually reserved for heads of state. His friends had ambushed him into this. Marcus and Jenna had cornered him at Lily's soccer practice 2 weeks ago, wearing matching expressions of concern that made him want to run for the hills. "You can't spend the rest of your life alone in that cabin," Jenna had said. "Watch me," Ethan had replied. "Lily needs to see you happy." That one had landed, because Jenna knew exactly which pressure point to hit, and Ethan had caved like wet cardboard. Now he was here, wearing the only button-down shirt he owned that didn't have sawdust ground into the collar, waiting for a woman whose name he'd already forgotten. "Sarah? Sandra?" His phone buzzed. "Marcus. She's running late. Traffic from Denver. Don't bail." Ethan. "I'm giving her 10 more minutes." Marcus. "You'll give her 20 and you'll smile." Ethan shoved the phone into his jacket pocket and flagged down the waiter for another coffee. The kid couldn't have been older than 22, with the kind of eager professionalism that suggested he was working his way through college. "Rough night?" the waiter asked, refilling the cup. "Blind date." "Ah." The kid nodded sympathetically. "Those are either really good or spectacularly bad. No in between." "Yeah, well, I'm not optimistic." The waiter grinned and moved on. Ethan checked his watch. 7 minutes past 8. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the lake stretched black and still under a sky packed with stars. Aspen in October was cold enough that most tourists had cleared out, leaving the town to the locals and the handful of wealthy people who owned vacation homes they visited twice a year. Ethan didn't belong in places like this. He belonged in his workshop, or hiking the trails behind his property with Lily, or fixing the porch railing he'd been ignoring for 3 weeks. He belonged anywhere but here, waiting for a stranger to show up and pretend to be interested in his life for 90 uncomfortable minutes. His phone buzzed again. "Jenna. She's gorgeous, by the way. Successful, too. VP at some tech company. Be nice." Ethan groaned. The door opened. Cold air swept through the restaurant, carrying the scent of pine and snow. A woman walked in, and every head in the room turned. She was tall, maybe 5'9", with dark hair pulled back in a way that looked effortless, but probably wasn't. She wore a charcoal coat that fit like it had been tailored specifically for her, and boots that clicked against the hardwood floor with the kind of authority that made people step aside without realizing they were doing it. She scanned the room, her gaze sharp and assessing, and Ethan had the sudden terrible certainty that this was his date. She spotted him. Their eyes met across the restaurant, and something flickered in her expression. Surprise, maybe? Or disappointment? Hard to tell. She walked over. "Ethan? That's me. Victoria." She extended a hand. Her grip was firm, professional. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic was worse than I expected." "No problem. Motor motorists." She slid into the booth across from him, shrugging out of her coat. Underneath, she wore a simple black sweater and jeans that probably cost more than his truck payment. Up close, she was even more striking, but there was something off about her smile. It was polished, automatic, the kind of expression someone wore when they'd been smiling at strangers for so long they'd forgotten what a real one felt like. "So," she said, "this is awkward." Ethan blinked. Yeah, Marcus and Jenna set this up?" "Yeah, you?" "My assistant." Victoria picked up the menu, scanned it without apparent interest, and set it back down. "She's been hounding me for months to get out more. Her words, not mine." "Sounds familiar." The waiter appeared. Victoria ordered a glass of red wine. Ethan stuck with coffee. When the waiter left, silence dropped between them like a brick. Victoria drummed her fingers on the table, then stopped, as if catching herself in a nervous habit she'd trained herself out of. I'm going to be honest with you, I'm terrible at this. Same. I work too much. I'm not great at small talk, and I have a suspicion that your friends and my assistant think we're both charity cases. Ethan couldn't help it. He laughed. It surprised him, the sound rough and unfamiliar. Yeah, that about sums it up. Something in Victoria's expression shifted. The polished smile cracked, just slightly, and for a second she looked almost human. Well, at least we're on the same page. The waiter returned with the wine. Victoria took a sip, closed her eyes briefly, and exhaled. Long day? Ethan asked. Long year. Want to talk about it? Not really. She opened her eyes. What about you? What do you do? I'm a carpenter. I build furniture, cabinets, custom woodwork, that kind of thing. Do you like it? Most days. And the other days? Ethan hesitated. Most people didn't ask follow-up questions. They heard carpenter and either lost interest or started talking about their own kitchen renovations. But Victoria was watching him with an intensity that made him think she actually wanted an answer. The other days I remember why I started doing it in the first place, he said. It's honest work. You start with raw materials and you build something real, something that lasts. Victoria nodded slowly. That must be nice. What do you do? I run a tech company. What kind of tech? Cloud infrastructure, data security, enterprise solutions. She said it the way someone might describe a dentist appointment. It's boring. Doesn't sound boring. Trust me, it is. They fell into silence again, but this time it didn't feel quite as heavy. Ethan studied her. She was beautiful, no question, but there was something exhausted in the way she held herself, like she was performing even when she wasn't trying to. Can I ask you something? He said. Sure. Why are you here? Victoria looked up sharply. Excuse me? I don't mean that in a rude way. I just mean you don't seem like someone who needs her assistant to set up dates. You could probably walk into any bar in Denver and have 20 guys lining up to buy you a drink. She laughed, but it was a brittle sound. You'd be surprised. Try me. Victoria picked up her wine glass, swirled it, set it back down without drinking. Okay, honest answer? Please. I haven't been on a real date in 3 years. I've been to 100 charity galas and networking dinners and investor meetings where men hit on me, but those don't count. Those people don't see me. They see my company, or my money, or a photo op. Vamos? She paused. My assistant set this up because she's worried I'm going to work myself to death. And she's probably right. Ethan didn't know what to say to that, so he didn't say anything. He just nodded. Victoria smiled, and this time it looked almost real. Your turn. Why are you here? My friends think I'm depressing. Are you? Probably. Why? Ethan looked out the window at the lake. The honest answer was complicated. The honest answer involved his late wife and the car accident that killed her, and the 2 years he'd spent after that barely keeping his head above water while raising Lily alone. But he didn't know this woman, and he sure as hell wasn't going to dump all of that on her in the first 10 minutes. I lost someone, he said finally, a while ago. I've been stuck ever since. Victoria's expression softened. I'm sorry. It's fine. It's not. But I appreciate you telling me. They ordered food. Ethan got a steak he didn't particularly want. Victoria ordered a salad she barely touched. The conversation drifted into safer territory. The weather, the town, the ridiculous price of real estate in Aspen. It was fine, painless, forgettable. But then Victoria said something that caught him off guard. Do you have kids? A daughter, Lily. She's 8. What's she like? Most people ask that question out of politeness and then tuned out the answer. But Victoria leaned forward, her eyes locked on his, and Ethan found himself talking. She's stubborn, smart, too smart sometimes. She likes soccer and climbing trees and building things. She's obsessed with finding out how stuff works. Last week she took apart the toaster because she wanted to see the heating coils. Did you get mad? I helped her put it back together, but... Victoria smiled, a real smile this time, the kind that reached her eyes. She sounds amazing. She is. Does she know you're on a date tonight? Yeah, she helped me pick out this shirt. Good choice. I'll tell her you said so. The waiter cleared their plates. Ethan checked his watch and realized they'd been sitting there for over an hour. It hadn't felt that long. I should probably get going, Victoria said. I have a call with Singapore at 6 a.m. It's okay. Yeah, I've got to pick up Lily from my friend's place. They stood. Victoria pulled on her coat and Ethan walked her to the door. Outside, the cold hit them like a wall. Their breath misted in the air. The parking lot was nearly empty. Thank you, Victoria said, for not making this completely awful. Same. She hesitated, and Ethan had the distinct impression she wanted to say something else. But then her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her expression shifted back into that polished, distant mask. I have to take this, she said. It was nice meeting you, Ethan. You too. She walked to a black SUV parked near the entrance, phone already pressed to her ear. Her voice clipped and professional. Ethan watched her go, then headed to his truck. He figured that was the end of it. He was wrong. 2 weeks later, Ethan was in his workshop behind the cabin, elbow deep in a custom dining table commission, when Lily burst through the door. Dad, there's a fancy car in the driveway. Ethan looked up from the router. What? A really fancy car. Like movie star fancy. He wiped sawdust off his hands and followed her outside. Sure enough, parked next to his beat-up F-150 was a sleek black Tesla that looked like it had rolled off the showroom floor that morning. Victoria Hale stood next to it, hands shoved in the pockets of a jacket that probably cost more than his mortgage. Lily stared at her with the unfiltered awe of an 8-year-old meeting someone who drove a cool car. Whoa. Hi, Victoria said. She looked at Ethan. I'm sorry to just show up like this. I tried calling, but I realized I don't have your number. How did you find me? I asked Marcus. He seemed thrilled. Ethan could imagine. Marcus was probably already planning the wedding. Is this a bad time? Victoria asked. No, it's fine. I was just working. He gestured to the workshop. What's up? Victoria glanced at Lily, then back at Ethan. Can we talk? Sure, Lily. Head inside and finish your homework. But now. Lily groaned but obeyed, shooting one last longing look at the Tesla before disappearing into the cabin. Ethan led Victoria around to the back porch, where a couple of mismatched chairs overlooked the forest. So, he said, what brings you all the way out here? Victoria sat down, and for a moment she just stared at the trees. The afternoon light filtered through the branches, turning everything soft and golden. It was quiet out here. No traffic, no sirens, just wind and birdsong. I needed to get out of the city, she said finally, and I've been thinking about that night at the restaurant. Okay, I don't do this. I don't track people down at their homes. I don't take spontaneous drives to the mountains. I have a schedule. I have meetings. I have 100 people who need me to make decisions every single day. Ethan waited. But I can't stop thinking about what you said, Victoria continued, about building something real, something that lasts. She turned to look at him. I haven't built anything real in years. I've built a company. I've built a brand. I've made more money than I know what to do with. But I can't remember the last time I made something that mattered. Why are you telling me this? Because when I was sitting across from you at that restaurant, I felt normal. For the first time in I don't know how long, I wasn't performing. I wasn't selling. I was just a person having dinner with another person. She paused. I want more of that. Ethan didn't know what to say. He studied her, trying to figure out if this was real or if he was being set up for something. But all he saw in her face was exhaustion and something close to desperation. You want to hang out? He said. I want to be somewhere that isn't suffocating me. Okay? Okay? Yeah, stay for dinner. Lily's making spaghetti. Well, I'm making spaghetti. She's in charge of garlic bread. Victoria blinked. Really? Unless you have somewhere else to be. I always have somewhere else to be. She smiled faintly. But I'd rather be here. Dinner was chaos. Lily interrogated Victoria with the relentless curiosity of a kid who'd never met anyone remotely famous. She wanted to know what kind of car that was, how fast it went, whether Victoria had ever met any celebrities, what it was like to be on TV. Victoria answered every question with surprising patience. She didn't talk down to Lily. She didn't deflect. She just talked to her like a person. Ethan made spaghetti and watched the two of them from the kitchen. Lily was showing Victoria her collection of rocks from the creek, explaining in exhaustive detail which ones were quartz and which ones were probably just boring limestone. Victoria listened like it was the most fascinating thing she'd heard all week. "Your daughter's great," Victoria said later, after Lily had gone to bed. They were sitting on the porch again, nursing beers Ethan had pulled from the fridge. The temperature had dropped, and their breath fogged in the air. "She's the best thing I've ever done," Ethan said. "She looks like you." "Poor kid." Victoria laughed. "I mean it. You're good at this." "At what?" "Being a parent, being present, caring about something more than yourself." She took a sip of beer. "I'm not good at any of that." "You seem pretty good with her tonight." That's different. I can handle a dinner conversation. But the rest of it, the day-to-day grind, I wouldn't know where to start. Most people don't. You just figure it out as you go." Victoria was quiet for a while. Then she said, "I don't think I want kids." "Okay. Doesn't that bother you?" "Why would it?" "I don't know. Most people have opinions about that kind of thing. I'm not most people." She smiled. "No, you're not." They sat in silence, watching the stars come out. Ethan couldn't remember the last time he'd felt this comfortable around someone new. Victoria was easy to be around. She didn't fill every silence with chatter. She didn't need him to entertain her. She just existed, solid and real, and somehow that was enough. "Can I come back?" she asked suddenly. "What? Next weekend, can I come back?" Ethan looked at her. "You want to drive 2 hours just to hang out in the middle of nowhere?" "Yes." "Why?" Victoria met his eyes. "Because I haven't felt this calm in 5 years." Ethan thought about it, about the complications this could bring, about the fact that she lived in a completely different world, about the fact that he had no business getting involved with someone like her. Then he thought about the way Lily had lit up at dinner, about the way Victoria's shoulders had finally relaxed, about the way the cabin felt a little less empty tonight. "Yeah," he said. "You can come back." "Mine." Victoria smiled. And that was how it started. She came back the next weekend, and the weekend after that, and the one after that. At first, Ethan figured the novelty would wear off. Rich people got bored easily, right? But Victoria kept showing up. She'd arrive Friday night, stay through Sunday, and leave looking more human than when she'd arrived. She helped Lily with her math homework. She learned how to split firewood, badly. She sat in Ethan's workshop and watched him work, asking questions about joinery and grain patterns, and why certain woods behave differently under stress. "You're actually interested in this stuff," Ethan said one Saturday afternoon. "Why wouldn't I be? Most people find it boring. Most people are idiots." Lily loved her. That was the part that surprised Ethan the most. His daughter, who was cautious around strangers and took months to warm up to new people, had decided within one weekend that Victoria was her new favorite person. "She's cool," Lily explained one night after Victoria had left. "Yeah? She talks to me like I'm not a little kid, and she knows stuff. Did you know she built her first computer when she was 12? "I did not know that." Also, her car goes 0 to 60 in 3.1 seconds. That's faster than a Porsche. Ethan ruffled her hair. "Don't get any ideas." But the truth was, he was getting ideas too. He tried not to. He reminded himself that this was temporary, that Victoria's real life was in Denver, running a company he couldn't begin to understand, that eventually she'd get tired of playing house in the mountains and go back to her actual world. But then she'd show up on Friday night, exhausted and frayed, and spend the weekend turning back into a person, and Ethan would forget all his very sensible reasons for keeping his distance. One night in early November, after Lily had gone to bed, Victoria asked if she could see what Ethan was working on. He led her to the workshop. The project was a rocking chair commissioned by a couple in town for their first grandchild. Ethan had been working on it for weeks, shaping each piece by hand, fitting the joints with the kind of precision that couldn't be rushed. Victoria ran her fingers along the armrest. "It's beautiful. It's not done yet. Still, you made this with your hands. From nothing. From wood. You know what I mean." Ethan leaned against the workbench. "Why do you keep coming here?" Victoria looked up. "What?" I'm serious. You could be anywhere right now. You could be at some fancy resort or networking with billionaires or doing whatever it is successful people do on weekends. But you keep driving 2 hours to hang out in a cabin with a guy who makes furniture and his 8-year-old daughter. Why? Victoria was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Because when I'm here, I remember what it feels like to be human." "You're human everywhere." "No, I'm not." She sat down on a stool, her hands folded in her lap. "In Denver, I'm a brand. I'm a CEO. I'm a photo opportunity. People want things from me every second of every day. They want my money or my connections or my endorsement. No one wants to just exist in the same room as me without expecting something in return. Gi? Samzitski. That sounds exhausting." "It is." She looked at him. "But here, I'm just Victoria. I'm the woman who burns garlic bread and can't split firewood without almost taking her own foot off. I'm the person who sits on your porch and doesn't have to be anything except present." She paused. "Do you know how rare that is?" Ethan didn't know what to say. Ethan didn't. So he walked over and sat down next to her on the stool, their shoulders almost touching. "For what it's worth," he said, "I like the version of you that burns garlic bread." Victoria laughed, soft and genuine. "Yeah?" "Yeah." They sat there in the quiet workshop, surrounded by sawdust and half-finished projects, and Ethan realized with absolute certainty that he was in trouble. Because he wasn't just comfortable around Victoria anymore. He was falling for her, and he had no idea what the hell he was supposed to do about it. The problem with falling for someone, Ethan discovered, was that you couldn't unfeel it once it started. It sat in your chest like a stone, heavy and warm, impossible to ignore. He tried. He spent the week between Victoria's visits convincing himself that what he felt was just loneliness dressed up as something else. He'd been alone for so long that of course he'd latch on to the first woman who showed up and didn't immediately run away screaming. It made sense. It was logical. Then Friday would roll around and Victoria would pull into his driveway, and every reasonable thought he'd had during the week would evaporate the second she smiled at him. It was December now. The mountains were buried under snow, and the roads into Aspen were treacherous enough that most weekenders stayed home. But Victoria kept coming. She traded the Tesla for a Range Rover with winter tires, and she drove those 2 hours every Friday like clockwork. Lily had started referring to her as Victoria, without the awkward pause kids usually had around adults they weren't related to. She'd loop her arm through Victoria's when they walked to the creek. She'd drag her into the living room to show her whatever art project she'd made at school that week. She'd convinced Victoria to help her build a birdhouse, which had resulted in a lopsided structure that no self-respecting bird would ever inhabit, but which now occupied a place of pride on the porch railing. Ethan watched all of this happen and didn't know whether to be grateful or terrified. One Friday night in mid-December, Victoria arrived later than usual. It was past 9 when her headlights cut through the darkness, and when she climbed out of the SUV, she looked more exhausted than Ethan had ever seen her. "Rough week?" he asked. "You have no idea what." Lily was already asleep, so it was just the two of them. Ethan made coffee and they sat at the kitchen table while Victoria told him about a hostile takeover attempt by a competitor, a data breach that had consumed 70 hours of crisis management, and a board meeting where 3 investors had demanded she explain why revenue growth had slowed by 2%. 2%, she said, her voice flat. "We're still profitable. We're still growing. But apparently 2% is the difference between success and failure." Sounds like bullshit. It is bullshit, but it's the game, and I'm tired of playing it. Ethan poured more coffee. "Why don't you quit?" "What?" Victoria laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I can't just quit. I built that company from nothing. I have 1,800 employees who depend on me. I have investors who expect returns. I have contracts and obligations and responsibilities that don't just disappear because I'm tired." "Okay. You think I'm making excuses. I think you're explaining why you're stuck. There's a difference." Victoria stared into her coffee cup. "You make it sound easy." It's not easy, but it's simple. You decide what you actually want, and then you do that thing. Everything else is noise. "And what if I don't know what I want?" "Then you figure it out." She looked at him, and something in her expression made Ethan's chest tighten. "What if what I want isn't practical?" Since when do you care about practical? Balkosan. Since always. My entire life has been about being practical, making smart decisions, building something sustainable. You don't get where I am by following your feelings. Ethan leaned back in his chair. You want my opinion? Not really, but I have a feeling you're going to give it to me anyway. I think you're so busy being smart that you forgot how to be happy, eh? Victoria flinched like he'd slapped her. For a second, Ethan thought he'd crossed a line, but then she exhaled long and slow and nodded. Yeah, she said quietly. You're probably right. They sat in silence. The cabin creaked around them, settling into the cold. Outside, snow had started falling again, fat flakes drifting past the windows. Can I tell you something? Victoria said. Sure. I've been thinking about selling the company. Ethan sat up straighter. What? Not all of it. Just enough that I wouldn't have to run it anymore. I'd keep a stake, stay on the board maybe, but hand over operations to someone who actually wants the job. She traced the rim of her coffee cup with one finger. I've been thinking about it for months. Every time I come here, I think about it more. What's stopping you? Fear, probably. I've been that company for so long I don't know who I am without it, and everyone expects me to keep going, to keep building, to keep winning. She paused. My ex-fiancé used to say that quitting was for people without vision. Your ex-fiancé sounds like an asshole. Victoria laughed, and this time it was real. He is. I don't know. I haven't talked to him in over a year. Good. He's the one who pushed me to expand as fast as we did. He had all these plans for acquisitions and market domination and becoming the next big thing. And I went along with it because I thought that's what success looked like. She shook her head. I was 26 and stupid. You're not stupid. I was stupid about him. Ethan wanted to ask more, but something in Victoria's face told him to let it go. So instead he said, You want to watch something terrible on TV and forget about all of this for a while? Yes, desperately. They moved to the couch. Ethan scrolled through streaming options until they landed on a cooking competition show that was equal parts drama and absurdity. Victoria curled up in the corner of the couch with a blanket, and halfway through the second episode she fell asleep with her head tilted against the cushions. Ethan watched her for a moment. Asleep? She looked younger, less guarded. The lines of tension around her eyes had smoothed out, and her breathing was deep and even. He should wake her up. Send her to the guest room. Keep everything appropriate and friendly and uncomplicated. Instead, he grabbed another blanket from the closet and draped it over her. Then he turned off the TV and went to bed, leaving her there on the couch because waking her felt cruel. When he came downstairs the next morning, she was gone. But there was a note on the counter, written in clean, precise handwriting. Thank you for letting me crash. I needed that more than you know. V. Lily wandered into the kitchen, still in her pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Where's Victoria? She had to leave early. But it's Saturday. She probably had work stuff. Lily frowned. She always has work stuff. Doesn't she ever get a break? Not as often as she should. That's sad. Yeah, Ethan said, staring at the note. It is. Victoria didn't come back the next weekend, or the one after that. Ethan told himself it was fine. She had a life, a demanding job, responsibilities. He had no claim on her time. They were friends. Barely even that, really. Just two people who'd had dinner a few times. But Lily kept asking where she was, and Ethan kept making excuses. And by the third weekend, he was checking his phone more often than he wanted to admit. On Christmas Eve, Marcus and Jenna invited them over for dinner. Ethan almost said no. He wasn't in the mood for company, and Lily had been sulking for days because Victoria hadn't shown up and wouldn't return her texts. She's probably just busy with holiday stuff, Ethan had said, or she doesn't like us anymore. Lily had replied with the brutal honesty of an 8-year-old. That's not true. Then why won't she text me back? Ethan didn't have an answer for that. At Marcus and Jenna's house, the kids disappeared into the basement to play video games while the adults clustered in the kitchen. Jenna was making mulled wine, and Marcus was arguing with his brother-in-law about whether Die Hard counted as a Christmas movie. So, Jenna said, cornering Ethan by the stove, how are things with Victoria? There are no things with Victoria. Come on. She was coming up here every weekend. And now she's not. Jenna studied him. Did something happen? No, she just got busy. Uh-huh. Jenna didn't look convinced. You know she's dating Damien Cross again, right? Ethan's stomach dropped. What? It's all over the news. Well, the business news. Apparently they were engaged a few years ago, broke it off, and now they're back together. There was a whole thing at some gala in Denver last week. Photos of them looking very cozy. Ethan set down his drink. I need some air, Set. He stepped out onto the back deck. The cold hit him like a wall, but he welcomed it. It gave him something to focus on besides the sudden hollow feeling in his chest. He'd been an idiot. Of course, Victoria had gone back to her real life. Of course, she'd reconnected with someone who actually belonged in her world. What had Ethan expected? That she'd give up everything to live in a cabin in the mountains with a guy who made furniture for a living? The door opened behind him. Marcus stepped out, holding 2 beers. Jenna sent me to apologize. For what? For being tactless. Marcus handed him a beer. She didn't realize you had feelings for her. I don't have feelings for her. Ethan, come on. Ethan took a long drink. It doesn't matter. She's back with her ex. End of story. Is it? What else would it be? Marcus leaned against the railing. I've known you for 15 years. I've never seen you look at anyone the way you looked at Victoria. Not even Rachel. Ethan flinched at his late wife's name. Don't. I'm not trying to be an asshole. I'm just saying, if you care about her, maybe you should tell her. And say what? Hey, I know you're back with your billionaire ex-fiancé, but have you considered dating a single dad who lives in the woods instead? Something like that, yeah. That's insane. Probably. Marcus grinned. But you're going to do it anyway, aren't you? Ethan didn't answer, because the truth was, he didn't know. 2 days after Christmas, Victoria showed up at the cabin unannounced. Ethan was in the workshop, trying to lose himself in work, when he heard the crunch of tires on snow. He looked out the window and saw the Range Rover. His first instinct was to stay in the workshop, to pretend he hadn't heard, to avoid the conversation he knew was coming. But then Victoria got out of the car, and even from a distance he could see that something was wrong. She stood next to the SUV for a moment, her hand on the door, like she was trying to decide whether to stay or leave. Ethan walked outside. Hey, he said. Victoria turned. Her eyes were red, and there was a bruise on her cheek that she'd tried to cover with makeup. What happened? Ethan demanded, closing the distance between them. It's nothing. That's not nothing. Victoria touched her cheek gingerly. I walked into a cabinet. It's fine. You're lying. Ethan, who did this to you? For a moment she didn't answer. Then she said very quietly, Damien? Rage, white hot and consuming, flooded through Ethan's chest. Where is he? In Denver, and you're not going anywhere. Victoria grabbed his arm. I'm fine. I left. It's over. So, did he hit you? Not exactly. He grabbed me during an argument, and I pulled away and hit my face on a shelf. He says it was an accident. And you believe him? No. Victoria's voice cracked. But it doesn't matter. I'm done. Ethan wanted to get in his truck and drive to Denver and find Damien Cross and break every bone in his entitled, abusive body. But Victoria was standing in front of him, shaking despite the heavy coat she wore, and she needed him here more than she needed him in a jail cell for assault. Come inside, Wishma, he said. I shouldn't have come. I just didn't know where else to go. You came to the right place. Inside, Ethan made tea while Victoria sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around the mug like she was trying to absorb its warmth. Lily was at a sleepover, which meant they were alone. Tell me what happened, Ethan said. Victoria took a shaky breath. We got back together in November. I was stressed and exhausted, and he showed up at my office with flowers and apologies and all the right words. He said he'd changed, that he understood now what he'd lost when we broke up the first time, and I was stupid enough to believe him. You're not stupid. You are. I am, because I knew better. I knew what he was like, controlling and manipulative and cruel when he didn't get his way, but I convinced myself that I'd misremembered. that maybe I'd been the problem. She laughed bitterly. Classic, right? What happened tonight? I told him I wanted to slow down, that I was thinking about restructuring the company so I'd have more time for myself, and he lost it. Started yelling about how I was throwing away everything we'd built, how I was being selfish and short-sighted and weak. You didn't build anything with him. I know, but he doesn't see it that way. In his mind, he's the one who pushed me to succeed. He's the one who made me into who I am. And the fact that I might want something different is a personal betrayal. Ethan's jaw tightened. What did he do? He grabbed my arm, told me I wasn't thinking clearly. I tried to pull away, and that's when I hit the shelf. Victoria touched her cheek again. He apologized immediately, said he didn't mean it, but I saw his face, Ethan. He wasn't sorry. He was just worried about how it would look if anyone found out. Did you call the police? No, I just left. Drove straight here. She looked at him. I'm sorry. I know I haven't been around. I know I stopped answering your text, but I didn't know where else to go. You can stay here as long as you need. I can't. Damien will look for me, and if he finds out I'm here, he'll make your life hell. He's vindictive like that. Let him try. You don't understand. He has money, connections. He can destroy people without lifting a finger. And he will if he thinks you're a threat. Ethan sat down across from her. I don't care. You should. Victoria, look at me. She did. Her eyes were wet, and she looked more fragile than he'd ever seen her. I'm not afraid of your ex, Ethan said, and I'm not going to let him hurt you again. So if you need a place to stay, you stay here. If you need someone to sit with you while you figure out what comes next, I'll sit with you. And if Damien Cross wants to make my life hell, he's welcome to try. But he's not getting near you again. Understood? Asherum. Mate Antin. Victoria's face crumpled. She covered her mouth with one hand, but a sob escaped anyway. Ethan stood and moved to her side of the table. He pulled her into his arms, and she buried her face against his shoulder and cried. He held her while she shook. While she whispered apologies he didn't need to hear. While she fell apart in a way she probably never allowed herself to in front of anyone else. When she finally pulled back, her face was blotchy, and her eyes were swollen, and Ethan thought she'd never looked more real. Thank you, she said. You don't have to thank me. I do. You're the only person who's ever made me feel safe. Something shifted in the air between them. Ethan was suddenly very aware of how close they were, how her hand was still resting on his arm, how easy it would be to close the distance and kiss her. But she'd just left an abusive relationship, and she was vulnerable, and the last thing she needed was Ethan taking advantage of that. So instead he said, You're staying in the guest room. I'll get you some clean towels. Victoria nodded. Okay. But neither of them moved. Ethan, she said softly. Yeah? I missed you. I missed you too, Mus. She stood on her toes and kissed his cheek. It was brief, barely more than a brush of lips against skin, but it sent electricity through his entire body. Then she pulled back and headed for the guest room, and Ethan stood in the kitchen trying to remember how to breathe. Victoria stayed through New Year's. She turned off her phone, ignored the hundreds of emails piling up in her inbox, and existed in the cabin like she'd always been there. Lily was thrilled. She'd practically tackled Victoria when she got home from her sleepover, and she'd spent the next 3 days attached to her hip. They built a snowman in the front yard. They made cookies that turned out burnt on the edges and raw in the middle. They stayed up too late watching movies and fell asleep on the couch in a tangle of blankets. Ethan watched it all happen and felt something dangerous taking root in his chest. This wasn't temporary anymore. This was starting to feel like family. On New Year's Eve, after Lily had gone to bed, Ethan and Victoria sat on the porch wrapped in blankets, watching fireworks bloom over the distant town. I have to go back eventually, Victoria said. I know. Damien's been calling, texting, sending emails. He's threatening to sue me for breach of contract if I don't attend the board meeting next week. Can he do that? Probably not, but he'll make it messy. She pulled the blanket tighter. I need to face this. I need to deal with him, but I'm terrified. You don't have to do it alone. Victoria looked at him. What do you mean? I'll go with you. To Denver. To the board meeting, wherever you need me. Well, Ethan, you can't just drop everything and come to Denver. Why not? You have Lily and your work and a life here. Marcus can watch Lily for a few days, and my work will still be here when I get back. He reached over and took her hand. You've been dealing with everything alone for too long. Let someone help you. Victoria's eyes filled with tears again, but she blinked them back. You'd really do that? Yeah, I really would. She squeezed his hand. Why? Because you matter to me. The words hung in the cold air between them. Victoria stared at him, her expression unreadable, and for a moment Ethan thought he'd miscalculated, that he'd said too much too soon. But then she leaned over and kissed him. It wasn't tentative or uncertain. It was deliberate and fierce, and Ethan felt the world tilt beneath him. He kissed her back, one hand tangling in her hair, and she made a small sound against his mouth that sent heat flooding through his veins. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. I've wanted to do that for months, Victoria said. Yeah? Since the night you made spaghetti and didn't try to impress me. Ethan laughed. That's a low bar. You'd be surprised. She kissed him again, softer this time. I'm serious about Denver. If you're willing to come, I want you there. Then I'm there. They stayed on the porch until the fireworks ended and the sky went dark. Then they went inside and Victoria kissed him one more time before heading to the guest room. Ethan lay in bed that night staring at the ceiling, his mind racing. He'd just agreed to walk into Victoria's world. To face down her abusive ex and navigate corporate politics, he didn't understand and potentially become a target for someone with the resources to make his life very difficult. But he'd also just kissed the woman he was falling in love with, and she'd kissed him back. And for the first time in years, he felt like maybe, just maybe, he was allowed to want something more than survival. The next morning, Victoria sat at the kitchen table with her phone, scrolling through messages with a grim expression. How bad? Ethan asked. Bad. Damien's filed a restraining order against me. What? He claims I've been harassing him, sending threatening messages, stalking him. She held up her phone. It's complete bullshit, but he has screenshots that look convincing. He faked them, obviously, but now I have to prove that, which means lawyers and court dates and a media circus. She set down the phone. He's doing this to scare me, to remind me that he can ruin my reputation whenever he wants. Ethan's hands curled into fists. There has to be something you can do. There is. I fight back. I hire the best lawyers money can buy and I bury him in paperwork until he backs off. Victoria's voice was hard. But that takes time. And in the meantime, he's going to drag my name through the mud. What about the company? Can he hurt you there? He's trying. He's got allies on the board. People who think I'm too emotional to lead, too unstable. And now with this restraining order, they have ammunition. Ethan sat down across from her. What do you need? I need to get ahead of this. I need to show the board that I'm in control, that Damien is the problem, not me. She looked at him. Which means I need to go back to Denver, today. Then let's go. Victoria blinked. You're serious? You think I'm going to let you walk back into that alone? Ethan, this is going to get ugly. Damien will dig into your life. He'll find every mistake you've ever made and use it against you. Are you really ready for that? Ethan thought about it. About his quiet life in the mountains. About Lily and the cabin and the workshops where he'd spent years hiding from the world. About everything he'd built in the aftermath of losing Rachel. Then he thought about Victoria, sitting across from him with bruises on her face and fire in her eyes, refusing to back down even when the entire world seemed determined to break her. Yeah, he said. I'm ready. Victoria smiled. It was small and tired, but it was real. Okay, she said. Let's go to war. They left for Denver 2 hours later. Marcus agreed to watch Lily without asking questions, though the look he gave Ethan said plenty. Victoria drove, her hands tight on the wheel, and Ethan sat in the passenger seat watching the mountains disappear behind them. You're quiet, Victoria said. Just thinking. About? Whether I'm about to make the biggest mistake of my life. Victoria glanced at him. You can still turn around. I'm not turning around. Yo, Ethan, I mean it. Once we get to Denver, once you're seen with me, Damien's going to come after you. He'll make it personal. He'll dig up everything he can find and twist it into something ugly. Let him. You don't know what you're saying. Ethan turned to look at her. I know exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying that I'm not letting you do this alone. I'm saying that whatever Damien throws at me, I can handle it. And I'm saying that you matter more to me than staying comfortable. Victoria's jaw tightened. She didn't respond, but her knuckles went white on the steering wheel. They drove in silence for another hour. The landscape shifted from mountains to foothills to the sprawling outskirts of Denver. Traffic thickened. Buildings rose on either side of the highway, glass and steel reflecting the afternoon sun. Ethan had been to Denver before, but not often. It was too big, too loud, too much of everything. He watched the city swallow them and wondered what the hell he'd gotten himself into. Victoria's apartment was in a high-rise downtown, the kind of building with a doorman and marble floors and an elevator that required a key card to access the upper floors. She pulled into the underground garage and parked in a spot marked with her name. "This is home," she said, but she didn't sound happy about it. They took the elevator to the 23rd floor. The doors opened directly into her apartment, which was less an apartment and more a showroom. Everything was white and chrome and glass. The furniture looked expensive and uncomfortable. There were no photos on the walls, no personal touches, nothing that suggested an actual human lived here. "It's very clean," Ethan said. "I'm never here." Victoria dropped her keys on a counter that looked like it had never been used for cooking. "I have a cleaning service that comes twice a week. Mostly they just dust." "Where do you sleep?" "When I'm here, the bedroom. But I usually crash at the office." Ethan walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows. The view was incredible, a panorama of the city stretching to the mountains beyond. But it felt cold, sterile, like a hotel room designed to keep people moving through without leaving a mark. "You don't like it," Victoria said. "It's just different from the cabin." That's a polite way of saying it's soulless. Ethan turned. "I didn't say that. Now, you didn't have to." Victoria kicked off her boots and walked to the kitchen. She opened the fridge, stared at the contents, and closed it again. "There's nothing to eat. I'll order something." "Victoria." "What?" "Come here." She hesitated, then crossed the room. Ethan pulled her into his arms, and she melted against him with a sigh that sounded like relief. "I'm scared," she said into his chest. "I know." "What if I can't do this? What if Damien wins?" "He's not going to win." "You don't know that." "Maybe not, but I know you, and I know you don't give up." Victoria pulled back enough to look at him. "I want to believe that." "Then believe it." She kissed him, hard and desperate, and Ethan kissed her back because it was the only thing he could give her right now. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "I need to make some calls," Victoria said. "My lawyers, my PR team. We need a strategy before the board meeting tomorrow." "What can I do?" "Just be here. That's enough." Ethan settled onto the uncomfortable couch, while Victoria disappeared into what he assumed was a home office. He could hear her voice through the door, sharp and professional. The Victoria who ran a billion-dollar company, instead of the one who burned garlic bread and fell asleep on his couch. An hour later, she emerged looking grim. "Well?" Ethan asked. "Damien's already talked to the board. He's painting me as unstable. Claims I've been making erratic decisions, disappearing for days without explanation, neglecting my responsibilities. And the restraining order gives him credibility." "Can you prove he's lying?" "Some of it, but not all of it." Victoria sat down next to him. "I have been disappearing. I have been distracted. The company's performance has slipped. He's taking real things and twisting them into a narrative that makes me look incompetent. What about the bruise on your face? I can't prove he did it. It's my word against his, and he'll say I'm making it up to discredit him." Ethan's frustration mounted. "So what's the plan?" "Tomorrow I go into that board meeting and I defend myself. I present the financials, show them that the company is still strong, and convince them that Damien is the liability, not me. And if they don't believe you?" Victoria met his eyes. "Then I lose everything I've built." The board meeting was scheduled for 10 the next morning. Victoria barely slept. Ethan woke up at 6 to find her already dressed, sitting at the kitchen counter with a laptop and a cup of coffee, reviewing documents. "Morning," he said. "Morning." Did you sleep at all? A little. That was a lie, but Ethan didn't push it. He made breakfast, which Victoria didn't eat, and tried to think of something useful to say. At 9:30, Victoria's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her face went pale. What? Ethan asked. She turned the phone around. On the screen was a photo of Lily, taken from a distance with a telephoto lens. She was at Marcus and Jenna's house, playing in the front yard. The caption read, "Cute kid. Be ashamed if something happened." Ethan's blood turned to ice. That son of a bitch. Victoria was already dialing. "I'm calling the police." "No." "Ethan, call Marcus. Make sure Lily's safe. Then we deal with this." Victoria made the call. Marcus confirmed that Lily was fine, inside the house, and promised not to let her out of his sight. But the damage was done. Damien had just made it clear that he was willing to go after an 8-year-old to get what he wanted. "I'm pulling out," Victoria said, her voice shaking. "I'm not doing the board meeting. I'm not giving him another chance to hurt her. That's what he wants. He wants you scared. He wants you to back down." "I don't care what he wants. I'm not risking Lily's safety." Ethan grabbed her shoulders. "Listen to me. If you pull out now, Damien wins. He gets the company, he gets control, and he learns that threatening the people you care about is an effective strategy. Is that what you want? Of course not. Then we go to that meeting, we show him that his threats don't work, and then we bury him." Victoria stared at him. "How?" "I don't know yet, but we'll figure it out." She took a shaky breath. Okay, let's go." The board meeting was held in a conference room on the 42nd floor of a downtown high-rise. Victoria's company, Next Tech Solutions, occupied 3 full floors, and the conference room was designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a table that could seat 30, leather chairs that probably cost more than Ethan's truck. 8 board members were already seated when they arrived. Ethan recognized Damien immediately. He was tall, polished, wearing a suit that screamed money and arrogance. He had the kind of face that looked friendly in photos but calculating in person. When Damien saw Ethan, his expression flickered with surprise, then hardened into something cold. "Victoria," he said smoothly, "I wasn't expecting you to bring a guest." This is Ethan Calloway," Victoria said. "He's here as my personal advisor." One of the board members, a silver-haired woman Ethan didn't recognize, frowned. "I wasn't informed we'd have additional attendees." "It's a closed meeting, Victoria," another board member added. "Ethan stays," Victoria said firmly. "Unless you'd like to explain to our legal team why you're excluding someone I've explicitly requested be present." "But..." The board members exchanged glances. Damien's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Fine, let's get started." The meeting was brutal. Damien opened with a presentation on the company's recent performance, highlighting every dip in revenue, every delayed project, every metric that had slipped in the past 6 months. He spoke with the confidence of someone who'd rehearsed this a dozen times, his tone reasonable and concerned. "I'm not here to attack Victoria," he said, looking directly at her. "I'm here because I care about this company. We all do. But we can't ignore the facts. Under Victoria's leadership, we've seen declining growth, missed targets, and a CEO who's been increasingly absent. I understand she's been dealing with personal issues, and I sympathize. But we have a responsibility to our investors, our employees, and our stakeholders." "Personal issues," Victoria repeated, her voice tight. "Is that what we're calling it?" "I'm simply stating what the data shows. The data shows a 2% decline in growth during a quarter where the entire tech sector contracted by 5%. We're still outperforming the market. By less than we used to. Because I've been focusing on sustainable growth instead of reckless expansion." Damien smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "And yet you've been spending weekends in the mountains instead of in the office. You've missed critical meetings. You've delegated decisions that should require your direct oversight. That's not sustainable leadership, Victoria. That's negligence." Ethan watched Victoria's hands clench into fists under the table. She was holding it together, but barely. "I've been managing a company with 1,800 employees while dealing with a manipulative ex-fiancé who's trying to sabotage me," Victoria said. and I've still delivered results. So unless you have actual evidence of negligence, I suggest you stop wasting everyone's time. Evidence? Damien's smile widened. He pulled out his phone and tapped the screen. A moment later, images appeared on the large monitor at the front of the room. They were photos of Victoria, at the cabin, in Ethan's workshop, playing in the snow with Lily. The images were taken from a distance, clearly without her knowledge. Ethan's stomach dropped. "This is where you've been spending your weekends," Damien said. "While the company was struggling, while your team was working overtime to cover for your absence, you were playing house with a carpenter in the mountains." The room went silent. Victoria stood. Her face was pale, but her voice was steady. "You had me followed. I had concerns about your judgment. I wanted to verify them. You invaded my privacy. I protected the company's interests. By stalking me? By threatening the people I care about?" Victoria's voice rose. "You sent a photo of an 8-year-old child to intimidate me. You think that's protecting the company?" Damien's expression shifted. For just a second, Ethan saw something ugly beneath the polished exterior. Then it was gone, replaced by concern. "I have no idea what you're talking about," Damien said smoothly. "Bullshit. Victoria, you're clearly under a great deal of stress. Perhaps we should table this discussion until you've had time to—" "I'm not tabling anything." Victoria pulled out her own phone. "You want to talk about evidence? Let's talk about this." She connected her phone to the monitor. A moment later, financial documents appeared on the screen. "These are records from the past 2 years," Victoria said. "They show a series of unauthorized transfers from company accounts to a shell corporation controlled by Damien Cross. Over $8 million moved in increments small enough to avoid triggering automatic audits." The board members leaned forward, squinting at the screen. Damien's face went white. "Those documents are fabricated." "They're not. I had our forensic accountants go through everything. You've been siphoning money from the company for months, using it to fund your own investments. And then you had the audacity to stand here and lecture me about negligence. This is absurd. I've never—" "There's more." Victoria pulled up another file. "These are emails between you and 3 board members discussing ways to force me out of the company. You've been planning a hostile takeover, using my personal life as leverage to convince the board I'm unfit to lead." The room erupted. Board members started talking over each other, demanding explanations. Damien stood, his hands raised in a gesture of innocence. "This is a setup," he said. "Victoria's desperate. She's trying to deflect blame by making wild accusations." "The evidence speaks for itself," Victoria said coldly. "Evidence you claim to have. Evidence that conveniently appears right when you need it most. Evidence that's been verified by independent auditors." Damien turned to the board. "She's lying. She's manipulating all of you because she knows she's failed. She's trying to destroy me to save herself. I'm trying to save this company from you," Victoria shot back. The silver-haired board member held up a hand. "Enough, both of you. We need to review these documents thoroughly before we make any decisions." "There's nothing to review," Damien said. "This is a witch hunt." "Then you should have no problem with an independent investigation," Victoria said. Damien's eyes narrowed. "Fine, investigate. But until then, I'm calling for an emergency vote of no confidence in Victoria's leadership." "You can't do that," one of the other board members said. "I can, and I am. She's clearly compromised. She's admitted to spending company time on personal matters. She's making reckless accusations without proof, and she's brought an outsider into a closed board meeting. That alone is grounds for removal." The board members looked at each other. Ethan could see the calculation in their eyes. They were business people. They cared about liability and optics and covering their own asses. "I'd like to call for a recess," the silver-haired woman said. "We need time to discuss this privately." "Absolutely not," Victoria said. "You want to discuss it now, in front of me." "Victoria, I built this company. I've given it everything. And I'm not going to sit quietly while you deliberate my future behind closed doors." The tension in the room was suffocating. Ethan wanted to say something, to defend her, but he knew his presence was already making things worse. Then Damien played his final card. "There's one more thing the board should know," he said. His voice was calm now, almost gentle. "Victoria has been under investigation by Child Protective Services." Victoria's face went ashen. What? I filed a report last week, expressing concerns about the welfare of the child she's been spending time with. The daughter of Mr. Calloway here. Damien gestured to Ethan. Given her erratic behavior, her emotional instability, I felt it was my responsibility to ensure the child was in a safe environment. Ethan stood. You son of a bitch. Ethan, don't, Victoria said, grabbing his arm. But Ethan shook her off. He crossed the room in 3 strides and got in Damien's face. You filed a report on my daughter? I filed a report on a concerning situation. You came after an 8-year-old because you couldn't control Victoria. That's what you did. Damien smiled. I did what any responsible person would do. And if you threaten me again, I'll have security remove you from the building. Ethan's hands curled into fists. Every instinct he had screamed at him to wipe that smug expression off Damien's face. But Victoria was there, her hand on his arm, her voice low and urgent. Don't, please. It's what he wants. Ethan forced himself to step back, to breathe, to not do the thing that would make everything worse. The investigation found nothing, Victoria said, her voice shaking. Because there was nothing to find. This is harassment. This is abuse. And you're using it to manipulate this board. I'm protecting this company, Damien said. You're destroying it. The silver-haired board member stood. We're calling a recess. 30 minutes. When we reconvene, we'll vote on next steps. And what are the options? Victoria demanded. Suspending you pending investigation, appointing an interim CEO, or accepting your resignation. Those are my only options? Given the circumstances, yes. Victoria looked around the room. At the board members who wouldn't meet her eyes. At Damien, who was watching her with barely concealed triumph. At Ethan, who felt utterly useless. Fine, she said. 30 minutes. They left the conference room. Victoria walked to the elevator without speaking, and Ethan followed. They rode down to the 39th floor, where Victoria's office was located. It was a corner office with windows on 2 sides and furniture that matched the sterile aesthetic of her apartment. Victoria closed the door and leaned against it. I'm going to lose, she said. You don't know that. Ethan, they've already made up their minds. Damien's been working them for weeks. They're going to suspend me, install him as interim CEO, and push me out within a month. Then fight back. How? I showed them evidence of embezzlement and they're still listening to him. They don't care about the truth. They care about stability. And right now, I'm the unstable one. Ethan crossed to her. So, quit. Victoria looked up sharply. What? Us. Quit. Right now. Don't give them the satisfaction of firing you. Walk away on your own terms. I can't just quit. Why not? You told me yourself you've been thinking about selling, about stepping back. Maybe this is your chance. It's not a chance. It's a disaster. It's only a disaster if you let it be. Ethan took her hands. You built this company from nothing. You made it successful. You proved you could do it, but you don't owe it your entire life, especially not if it's making you miserable. What about the employees? What about the people who depend on me? They'll be fine. Companies survive leadership changes. But you won't survive if you keep sacrificing yourself for something that's eating you alive. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. I don't know how to be anyone else. Then figure it out. You're smart. You're capable. You can build something new. Like what? I don't know, but it doesn't have to be this. Victoria pulled her hands free and walked to the window. She stared out at the city, her reflection ghostly in the glass. If I quit, Damien wins, she said. If you stay, he still wins, because you'll spend the rest of your life fighting him. Is that what you want? She didn't answer. Ethan walked up behind her. You told me you wanted to build something real, something that lasts. This isn't it. This is a war you can't win without destroying yourself in the process. So I just give up. No, you make a different choice. Victoria turned. Tears streaked her face, but her expression was resolute. If I do this, I need you to promise me something. Anything. Promise me you're not going to disappear, that you're going to be there when I have no idea what comes next. I promise. She kissed him. It was fierce and desperate and tasted like tears. When she pulled back, she wiped her eyes and took a deep breath. Okay, she said. Let's go back up there. What are you going to do? Victoria smiled. It was small and fragile, but it was real. I'm going to walk away. They returned to the conference room. The board members were already seated, looking grim. Damien sat at the head of the table, barely containing his satisfaction. Victoria didn't sit. She stood at the front of the room, her posture straight, her voice clear. I'm resigning, she said, effective immediately. The room went silent. You're what? The silver-haired woman said. I'm resigning. I'll stay on as a board member if you'll have me, but I'm stepping down as CEO. Damien leaned forward. Victoria, you don't have to do this. Yes, I do, because I'm tired of fighting you. I'm tired of sacrificing my life for a company that's become a weapon you can use against me. So I'm done. Think about what you're saying. I have, and I'm sure. Also, one of the other board members spoke up. What about the allegations against Damien, the embezzlement? Investigate them. Prosecute him if you find evidence. But I'm not going to be here to see it through. That's your responsibility now. She turned to Damien. You wanted control? Congratulations. You got it. I hope it was worth destroying everything we built. Damien's expression hardened. You're making a mistake. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. Victoria looked at Ethan. He nodded. Together, they walked out of the conference room, into the elevator, and out of the building. Outside, the afternoon sun was bright and cold. Victoria stood on the sidewalk, staring up at the high-rise like she was seeing it for the first time. I just walked away from everything, she said. Yeah, Ethan said. You did. I don't know what happens now. Neither do I. Victoria turned to him. I'm terrified. Me too. She laughed, shaky and breathless. What the hell are we doing? I don't know, but we're doing it together, Victoria took his hand, and for the first time in years she felt like maybe she could breathe. They drove back to Aspen in silence. Not the tense, suffocating silence from the drive down, but something quieter, emptier. Victoria stared out the window at the landscape sliding past, her hands loose in her lap, and Ethan didn't know if she was relieved or devastated or some complicated mixture of both. Halfway through the mountains, she finally spoke. I need to call my assistant. Tell her what happened before she hears it from someone else. What is? Okay. Victoria pulled out her phone, hesitated, then set it back down. Actually, I think I'm going to wait. Just for a few hours. Is that terrible? No. I just need to not be that person for a little while longer. The CEO. The public figure. I need to just be me. Then be you. She looked at him. Who's that? Ethan didn't have an answer. He suspected Victoria didn't either. When they pulled into the driveway, Marcus's truck was already there. Ethan's stomach tightened. He texted Marcus earlier to say they were coming back, but he hadn't explained what had happened. Hadn't figured out how to put it into words. Lily burst out of the cabin before they'd even turned off the engine. She ran to the Range Rover and yanked open Ethan's door. Dad, you're back! Did you beat the bad guy? Ethan climbed out and pulled her into a hug. Something like that. Victoria! Lily ran around to the other side. Are you okay? Marcus said someone was being mean to you. Victoria crouched down to Lily's level. I'm okay now. But thank you for worrying about me. Did you punch him? No, but I wanted to. Dad wanted to punch him too, I could tell. Ethan caught Marcus's eye over Lily's head. Marcus stood on the porch, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Lily, go inside and grab your stuff, Ethan said. I need to talk to Marcus for a minute. Well, but I want to hear about Denver. Later, I promise. Lily groaned, but obeyed. When she was inside, Marcus walked down the steps. So, he said, how bad? She resigned. Marcus blinked. What? Victoria quit, walked away from the whole thing. Jesus, why? Ethan glanced at Victoria, who was leaning against the SUV with her eyes closed. because staying was going to destroy her. Marcus studied him. And you're okay with that? It wasn't my decision. But you influenced it. Maybe. I don't know. She needed to get out, Marcus. You didn't see what that guy was doing to her. And what about what happens next? She just gave up a billion-dollar company. What's the plan now? There is no plan. Ethan, I know how it sounds, but she needed to walk away, and I'm going to be here while she figures out what comes next. Marcus shook his head. You're in deep. Yeah. You sure about this? Ethan looked at Victoria again. She'd opened her eyes and was watching Lily through the window, a small smile on her face. No, but I'm doing it anyway. Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. All right. Just don't say I didn't warn you when this gets complicated. It's already complicated. Fair point. After Marcus left, Ethan found Victoria sitting on the porch steps. Lily was inside, chattering about something that had happened at Marcus's house, her voice carrying through the open door. She's amazing, Victoria said. She likes you. The feeling's mutual. Ethan sat down next to her. You okay? I don't know. Ask me in a week. Fair enough. They sat in the cold, watching the sun sink behind the mountains. The sky turned orange, then pink, then deep purple. Stars began to appear, sharp and clear in the thin mountain air. I need to figure out what I'm doing, Victoria said. I have money, investments. I'll be fine financially, but I don't know what I want. You don't have to figure it out tonight. I've spent my entire adult life working toward one thing, and now that thing is gone. I feel like I should be devastated, but mostly I just feel relieved. That's not a bad thing. Isn't it? I built that company. It was mine, and I walked away without looking back. You walked away because it was eating you alive. That's not weakness. That's survival. Victoria leaned her head against his shoulder. I hope you're right. The next few days were strange. Victoria moved through the cabin like a ghost, helping with small tasks, but clearly adrift. She made coffee in the mornings and sat at the kitchen table staring at nothing. She took long walks through the woods and came back hours later with snow in her hair and no explanation of where she'd been. She slept fitfully, waking Ethan more than once with nightmares she wouldn't talk about. Lily noticed. Kids always noticed. Is Victoria sad? She asked one night while Ethan was tucking her in. A little. She's going through some stuff. Like when Mom died? The question hit Ethan in the chest. Not exactly, but similar. She lost something important. Yeah, she did. Lily was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Is she going to leave? I don't know. I don't want her to leave. Me neither, kiddo. Then tell her to stay. It's not that simple. Why not? Ethan didn't have a good answer, so he kissed Lily's forehead and turned off the light and left her with the kind of non-answer adults gave when they didn't know what else to say. A week after they got back from Denver, Victoria's lawyer called. The board had accepted her resignation and appointed Damien as interim CEO. The forensic audit she'd requested was moving forward, but slowly. There were rumors of settlements, NDAs, things being swept quietly under the rug. They're protecting him, Victoria said after she hung up. They know he's dirty, but they'd rather bury it than deal with the scandal. Can you do anything about it? I could go public, but my lawyer says that would open me up to defamation suits, and I don't have the energy to fight that battle. So Damien gets away with it. Probably. Ethan watched her face. She looked tired, worn down, but not broken. You're handling this better than I expected, he said. I'm not handling it. I'm just numb. Victoria set down her phone. Every time I think about what I lost, I panic. So I've stopped thinking about it. That's not sustainable. I know, but it's all I've got right now. 2 weeks turned into 3. Victoria's numbness started to crack. She'd have moments where she seemed almost normal, laughing at something Lily said or helping Ethan in the workshop. Then something would trigger her and she'd retreat into herself, silent and unreachable. One afternoon, Ethan found her sitting in the workshop holding a piece of unfinished wood. I used to know who I was, she said without looking up. I was the person who built things, who solved problems, who made decisions, and now I don't know what I am. Ethan sat down across from her. You're still all of those things? No, I was those things because of the company. Without it, I'm just someone with money and no purpose. That's not true, isn't it? What do I do now, Ethan? Sit around your cabin and pretend I'm happy playing house? Take up woodworking as a hobby? Become one of those rich people who dabble in things because they're bored? You could do whatever you want. That's the problem. I don't know what I want. Ethan reached across and took the wood from her hands. Then stop trying to figure it out all at once. Just exist for a while. Let yourself be aimless. I don't know how to be aimless. Then learn. Victoria looked at him, her eyes red-rimmed. What if I can't? What if I'm so broken I can't fix myself? Then I'll help you. Why? Why would you do that? Because I love you. The words came out before Ethan had fully processed them. They hung in the air between them, impossible to take back. Victoria stared at him. What? I love you, Ethan repeated, more certain this time. I've been in love with you since you showed up at my door and told me you needed somewhere that wasn't suffocating you. And I know the timing is terrible. I know you're going through hell, but I'm not going anywhere. Victoria's face crumpled. She covered her mouth with one hand and a sob escaped. Then another. She was crying, hard and ugly, the kind of crying that came from somewhere deep and painful. Ethan pulled her into his arms and let her fall apart. She clung to him, her fingers digging into his shirt, and cried like she hadn't let herself cry in years. When she finally stopped, she pulled back just enough to look at him. Her face was blotchy, her eyes swollen, and she'd never looked more beautiful to him. I love you too, she said, her voice hoarse. I don't know what the hell I'm doing with my life. I don't know who I am or what I want or how to be a person outside of work. But I know I love you, and that terrifies me. Why? Because what if I mess this up? What if I'm so damaged that I ruin the one good thing I have left? You won't. You don't know that. Maybe not, but I'm willing to take the risk. Are you? Victoria searched his face. Then she kissed him, soft and tentative, like she was testing whether he was real. Yeah, she whispered against his lips. I'm willing to take the risk. They didn't talk about the future that night. They just existed together, tangled up on the workshop floor until the cold drove them inside. Lily was already asleep, so they sat on the couch with mugs of tea and watched the fire burn low. I want to stay, Victoria said suddenly. What? Here, in Aspen. I want to stay. Ethan set down his mug. For how long? I don't know, maybe permanently. Is that crazy? Probably. But you're not telling me no. I'm not telling you anything. This is your decision. Victoria pulled her knees to her chest. I've been thinking about it for weeks. I don't want to go back to Denver. I don't want to live in that sterile apartment and pretend I'm fine. I want to be here. With you. With Lily. I want to figure out who I am in a place that doesn't expect me to be anything. What about your life in Denver? Your friends? Your work? This job? I don't have friends in Denver. I have colleagues and networking contacts and people who want things from me. And my work is gone. She looked at him. This is the first place I felt like I could breathe in years. Why would I leave? Because it's a huge change. Because you might regret it. Because you've been here for 3 weeks and real life is different from hiding. I'm not hiding. Aren't you? Victoria flinched. Maybe. A little. But so what? Is it so terrible to want a life that doesn't make me want to crawl out of my skin? No. But you need to be sure, because if you stay, it's going to get real. You're going to have bad days. You're going to miss your old life. And you can't run when it gets hard. I won't run. You sure about that? Victoria met his eyes. No, but I want to try. Come on. Ethan studied her. She looked fragile and determined all at once, and he knew that whatever choice he made right now would matter. Okay, he said. Stay. Yeah? Yeah, but we do this the right way. You find a place of your own. You take time to figure out what you actually want instead of just reacting to what you lost. And we take this slow. I don't want my own place. I want to be here. Victoria saw. I know what you're going to say. That it's too fast. that I need space. But I've had space my entire life. I've had so much space, I forgot what it felt like to be close to someone. And I don't want that anymore. Ethan wanted to argue, to point out all the ways this could go wrong. But Victoria was looking at him with such raw hope that he couldn't bring himself to crush it. "We'll take it one day at a time," he said finally. "And if it stops working, we figure something else out. Deal?" Deal. They shook on it like business partners, and then they both laughed because it was absurd and serious and exactly what they needed. The following week, Victoria started carving out a life in Aspen. She bought a car better suited to mountain roads. She registered to volunteer at Lily's school. She started learning woodworking in Ethan's workshop, producing lopsided projects that made Lily giggle and Ethan smile. She also started seeing a therapist, which she announced one morning like she was confessing to a crime. "I found someone in town. She specializes in trauma and life transitions. I have my first appointment on Thursday." "That's good," Ethan said. "You're not going to tell me I don't need therapy? Why would I? Most people think therapy is for people who are broken. Most people are idiots." Victoria smiled. "Fair point." The therapist helped. Not immediately, and not in any dramatic way, but slowly Victoria started to uncurl. She talked more, slept better, stopped flinching every time her phone buzzed. She also started getting involved in the community. She funded a new playground at the elementary school. She helped organize a winter market for local artisans. She became a regular at the coffee shop in town, where the barista knew her order and the owner didn't treat her like a celebrity. "People here are different," she told Ethan one night. "They don't care that I used to run a tech company. They care that I showed up to help with the bake sale and didn't complain when the oven broke. Welcome to small town life. I think I like it." "You think?" "Okay, I definitely like it." But it wasn't all smooth. There were days when Victoria woke up in a panic, convinced she'd made a terrible mistake. Days when she scrolled through news about her old company and felt like she'd abandoned something important. Days when she and Ethan fought about stupid things because the real issues were too big to articulate. One particularly bad fight happened in early February. Victoria had been irritable all day, snapping at Lily over homework and criticizing the way Ethan organized his tools. Finally, he'd had enough. "What's going on with you?" he asked. "Nothing. That's bullshit. I'm fine." "You're not fine. You've been picking fights all day." Victoria slammed down the dish she'd been washing. "Maybe I'm tired of pretending everything's perfect. Maybe I'm tired of playing house and acting like I'm happy when I have no idea what I'm doing with my life." "I never asked you to pretend." "You? About? Just it." "You didn't have to. It's what everyone expects. You, Lily, this whole town. Everyone wants me to be this grateful, healed person who's so thankful to have escaped the big bad corporate world. But I'm not healed. I'm still angry. I'm still lost. And I don't know if I'm ever going to figure it out." Ethan crossed his arms. "So what do you want to do about it?" "I don't know." "Then stop taking it out on me and Lily." Me. Oh. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry. I don't mean to. I just don't know how to be this person." "What person?" "This version of me. The one who doesn't have all the answers. Who doesn't have a plan. Who's just muddling through and hoping it works out." Ethan's anger softened. "You think I have all the answers?" "You seem like you do." "I don't. I'm making this up as I go, same as you. The only difference is I've had more practice at being lost." Victoria wiped her eyes. "I hate this." "I know. I hate feeling weak." "You're not weak. You're human." "Same thing." "No, it's not." They stood in the kitchen, the tension slowly bleeding out of the room. Finally, Victoria said, "I'm sorry I yelled at Lily." "Tell her, not me." "I will." She did. That night, she went into Lily's room and apologized for being short-tempered. Lily, with the easy forgiveness of children, hugged her and said it was okay. "Everyone has bad days," Lily said sagely. "Dad has them too." "He does?" "Yeah, he gets really quiet and goes to the workshop and doesn't come out for hours. But then he feels better." Victoria glanced at Ethan, who was standing in the doorway. He shrugged. "She's not wrong," he said. After Lily went to sleep, Victoria and Ethan sat on the porch. It was cold enough that their breath misted, but neither of them wanted to go inside yet. "I'm scared I'm going to screw this up," Victoria said. "You might. That's not reassuring. I might screw it up too. We're both going to make mistakes. That's how this works. And what happens when we do? We figure it out. We apologize. We try again. Victoria leaned her head on his shoulder. You make it sound simple. It's not simple, but it's worth it. They sat in the cold until Victoria started shivering, and then they went inside and climbed into bed and held each other like they were afraid to let go. In March, Victoria got a call from her lawyer. The forensic audit had uncovered enough evidence of Damien's embezzlement that the board had quietly forced him out. He'd agreed to resign in exchange for the company not pursuing criminal charges. He's gone, Victoria said after she hung up. He's out of the company, out of my life. How do you feel? I don't know, relieved, I guess, but also angry that he got away with it. He didn't get away with it. He lost the company. He lost my company, and he's walking away with millions. But he lost the thing he wanted most, control. Victoria thought about that. Yeah, I guess he did. She didn't celebrate, didn't feel the closure she'd expected. But over the following weeks, she noticed that she'd stopped checking her phone obsessively, stopped worrying about what Damien might do next, stopped looking over her shoulder. I think I'm healing, she told her therapist. What makes you say that? I went 3 days without thinking about him. That's a record. Her therapist smiled. That's progress. It was. By April, Victoria had settled into something that almost looked like a routine. She woke up with Ethan, made breakfast, walked Lily to the bus stop. She spent mornings in the workshop, learning techniques from Ethan and producing pieces that were gradually getting less terrible. She spent afternoons volunteering or meeting with people in town about small projects she was funding. She spent evenings with Ethan and Lily, cooking dinner and playing board games and arguing about what to watch on TV. It was ordinary, quiet, nothing like the life she'd had before, and she loved it. I never thought I'd be happy doing nothing, she told Ethan one night. You're not doing nothing. You're living. Same thing. No, it's not. Victoria smiled. You're right. It's better. One Saturday in late April, Lily came running into the kitchen with a piece of paper. Victoria, I need your help. With what? Career day is next week and I have to bring someone to talk about their job. Will you come? Victoria hesitated. I don't have a job anymore, kiddo. But you used to be a CEO. That's so cool. Please? Victoria looked at Ethan, who shrugged. It's up to you. She thought about it, about standing in front of a classroom full of 8-year-olds and talking about a life she'd left behind, about explaining success and failure and what it meant to walk away from something you'd built. Okay, she said, I'll do it. Career day was chaotic. There were firefighters and doctors and a guy who trained dogs for movies. Victoria stood in front of Lily's class in jeans and a sweater, feeling absurdly out of place. My name is Victoria, she said, and I used to run a technology company. The kids stared at her with varying degrees of interest. What's a technology company? One kid asked. It's a business that creates software and tools that help people communicate and share information. Like YouTube? Sort of, but for businesses. That sounds boring, another kid said. Victoria laughed. It was sometimes, but it was also exciting. I got to solve problems and build things and work with smart people. Why did you stop? Lily asked. Victoria looked at her. Because I realized that having a successful job isn't the same as having a happy life. And I wanted to be happy. Are you happy now? Yes, Itya, Victoria said, surprised by how true it was. I really am. After career day, Lily was insufferable. Everyone thought you were so cool, she said at dinner. Emma said she wants to be a CEO when she grows up, and Jackson asked if you were famous. I'm not famous. You're a little famous. Infamous, maybe. Lily giggled. Ethan reached across the table and squeezed Victoria's hand. You did good today, he said. It felt good. Weird, but good. That night, after Lily was asleep, Victoria and Ethan sat on the porch with blankets and hot chocolate. I've been thinking, Victoria said. About? What I want to do, long term. And I want to help people, not in some abstract philanthropic way. I want to actually do something useful. Like what? I don't know yet, but I have money. I have skills. I should be using them for something that matters. Ethan smiled. I think that's a great idea. You do? Yeah, you're good at building things. You should build something that helps people. Victoria leaned against him. I love you. I love you too. They sat in the quiet, watching stars appear over the mountains, and Victoria felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. By summer, Victoria had found her purpose. It started small. She'd been having coffee with the owner of a struggling bookstore in town, listening to her talk about rising rent and declining foot traffic, and the very real possibility of closing after 20 years in business. Victoria had offered to help with a loan, but the owner had shaken her head. I don't need charity. I need customers. That conversation stuck with Victoria. She started noticing how many small businesses in Aspen were barely hanging on. The bakery that made incredible sourdough but couldn't afford a new oven. The art gallery that showcased local artists but didn't have the budget for proper marketing. The community center that needed repairs it couldn't finance. These people aren't asking for handouts, she told Ethan one night. They just need someone to believe in them, to give them the resources to do what they're already good at. So give them resources. It's not that simple. If I just throw money at people, it doesn't solve the underlying problems. They need strategy, systems, someone who understands business. Ethan looked at her. You understand business? Yeah, I do. That's when the idea took shape. Victoria created a foundation, but not the typical kind that wrote checks and hosted galas. This one was hands-on. She hired a small team, rented office space in town, and started working directly with local businesses and nonprofits. She helped them develop business plans, secure funding, implement better systems. She used everything she'd learned building her company, but this time she was building something for other people. The work was different from running Nextech, smaller scale, more personal, but it mattered in ways her old job never had. I helped the bookstore owner renegotiate her lease today. Victoria told Ethan and Lily at dinner one night. She's going to stay open. That's awesome, Lily said. It is. She cried when I told her, like real tears. How'd that make you feel? Ethan asked. Victoria thought about it. Good. Really good. Like I did something that mattered. You did. It wasn't all smooth. There were businesses that failed despite her help. People who resented her involvement, who saw her as an outsider trying to fix problems she didn't understand. Board meetings for the foundation that devolved into arguments about priorities and spending. Days when Victoria came home exhausted and questioning whether any of it made a difference. But there were also victories. The bakery expanded. The art gallery got featured in a regional magazine. The community center reopened with new programs for kids. And slowly, the town that had once been just a place Victoria hid became somewhere she belonged. You're becoming a local, Jenna told her at a school fundraiser. Am I? Definitely. People don't introduce you as the billionaire anymore. You're just Victoria, the one who helped save the bookstore. I didn't save it. I just helped. Same thing. Victoria smiled. It felt strange to be known for something other than her net worth or her former company. Strange, but good. Meanwhile, her relationship with Ethan deepened in ways that were both terrifying and wonderful. They fought sometimes, usually about stupid things that masked bigger fears. Victoria worried she was too damaged to be a good partner. Ethan worried he was too set in his ways to make space for someone new. But they kept showing up for each other, kept choosing to stay even when it was hard, and gradually the fear started to fade. Lily was the glue that held them together. She'd started calling Victoria by her first name without the hesitation she'd had at the beginning. She'd drag Victoria to school events and soccer games and play dates like it was the most natural thing in the world. She'd developed a habit of leaving drawings on Victoria's desk at the foundation office, usually featuring the three of them as superheroes or astronauts, or once memorably as a family of bears. Why bears? Victoria had asked. Because bears are strong and they protect each other, Lily had explained, like it was obvious. Victoria had kept that drawing in her office, pinned to the wall where she could see it every day. In August, Marcus cornered Ethan at a barbecue. So when are you going to marry her? Ethan nearly choked on his beer. What? Victoria, when are you going to marry her? We've been together less than a year. So? You love her. She loves you. Lily loves her. What are you waiting for? I don't know. The right time? Marcus snorted. There's no such thing as the right time. There's just now and later, and you're an idiot if you pick later. That's easy for you to say? You and Jenna knew each other for 3 years before you got engaged. And I should have done it sooner. Life's short, man. Don't waste it being careful. Ethan thought about that conversation for weeks. He'd been careful his entire life. Careful after Rachel died, protecting himself and Lily from getting hurt again. Careful about who he let in, how much he revealed, how deeply he allowed himself to care. But Victoria had blown through all of that caution like it didn't exist, and he'd never been happier. The question wasn't whether he wanted to marry her. He did. The question was whether she was ready for that kind of commitment. He decided to ask her the worst possible way. Directly. They were in the workshop one Saturday afternoon. Victoria was working on a jewelry box for Jenna's birthday, sanding the edges with intense concentration. Ethan had been trying to figure out how to bring it up for an hour, and finally he just said it. "Do you want to get married?" Victoria looked up, startled. "What? I'm asking if you want to get married. Not necessarily to me, although that would be ideal, but in general. Is that something you see in your future?" Victoria set down the sandpaper. "Are you asking me to marry you?" "I'm asking if you'd say yes if I did." "That's the weirdest proposal I've ever heard." "It's not a proposal. It's reconnaissance." Victoria laughed. "Reconnaissance. I need to know if this is something you'd even consider before I plan an actual proposal." "Why?" "Because if you're not interested, I'd rather know now than after I've made a fool of myself." Victoria walked over and sat down next to him on the workbench. "You're serious?" "Yeah." "You want to marry me?" "I do." She was quiet for a long moment. "I never thought I'd get married. I always figured I'd be too focused on work, too driven, too much of a disaster to make it work with anyone. And now? Now I think maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was just with the wrong person before." She took his hand. "I'd say yes. If you asked, I'd say yes." Ethan felt something loosen in his chest. "Okay, but I have conditions." "Of course you do. I don't want a big wedding. I don't want press coverage or society pages or any of that. I just want us. And Lily. And the people who actually matter. Done. And I don't want a ring that costs a fortune. I want something you made." Oh, Ethan blinked. "You want me to make your engagement ring?" "Yeah, is that weird?" "No, it's perfect." Victoria smiled. "So is that a proposal or not?" "Not yet. I'm doing this properly." "When?" "You'll find out." She kissed him, and Ethan made a mental note to start designing a ring immediately. It took him 3 weeks to get it right. He'd never made jewelry before, and the learning curve was steep. He burned through a dozen prototypes before he created something he was satisfied with. A simple silver band with a small diamond set in wood from the first piece of furniture he'd made for Victoria, a side table she kept next to the couch. "It's not fancy," he told Marcus, showing him the finished product. "But it's hers. It's perfect, man." Ethan planned the proposal for the place where everything had started, the lake where they'd had their first date. He told Victoria he wanted to go for a walk after dinner, and she'd agreed without suspicion. Lily was in on it. She'd spent the entire day vibrating with excitement, practically bouncing off the walls. "Can I come watch?" she'd begged. "No, this is between me and Victoria. But I want to see her face. You'll see it after, I promise." They drove to the lake as the sun was setting. The air was crisp, the sky streaked with orange and pink. Victoria walked beside him along the shore, her hand in his, talking about a grant proposal she was working on for the community center. Ethan led her to the spot where they'd sat on their first date, a bench overlooking the water. "This feels familiar," Victoria said. "It should." She looked at him, and something in his expression must have tipped her off because her eyes went wide. "Ethan." "Victoria Hale," he said, pulling the ring from his pocket. "You walked into my life when I'd convinced myself I didn't need anyone. You were stubborn and brilliant and completely wrong for me on paper. But you made me remember what it felt like to want something more than just getting through the day." "Ethan, you don't have to, let me finish." He took her hand. "You walked away from everything you'd built because it was destroying you. You came to the mountains and you stayed even when it was hard. You learned to love my daughter. You learned to love this life. And somewhere along the way, you became the best part of my world. Victoria's eyes were wet. So I'm asking you, properly this time, if you'll marry me. If you'll stay with me and Lily and build something real. Something that lasts. He opened the box. The ring caught the fading light, simple and unpretentious and exactly right. Victoria looked at it, then at him, and for a terrifying moment Ethan thought she might say no. Then she laughed, messy and breathless. You made this yourself. Yeah. It's terrible. I know. I love it. She held out her hand. Put it on. Ethan slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Victoria stared at it, then at him, and then she was kissing him, and Ethan was kissing her back. And somewhere in the background he was pretty sure he could hear Lily cheering, even though she was supposed to be at home. When they pulled apart, Victoria was crying and laughing at the same time. I can't believe I'm getting married, she said. Having second thoughts already? No. Just shocked. A year ago I was running a company I hated and engaged to a man who hurt me. And now I'm here with you, and I'm happy. Actually happy. It doesn't feel real. It's real. Promise? I promise. Yeah. They sat on the bench as the sun disappeared and the stars came out, and Ethan thought about how strange and unpredictable life was. How a blind date he hadn't wanted to go on had led to this moment. How loss and grief and years of loneliness had somehow led him to the person sitting next to him, wearing a ring he'd made with his own hands. They got married 3 months later, in November, in the clearing behind the cabin. It was small, like Victoria had wanted. Just Marcus and Jenna and a handful of close friends. Lily was the flower girl, wearing a dress she'd picked out herself and shoes she complained about for the entire ceremony. Victoria wore a simple white dress and boots because the ground was cold. Ethan wore a suit that fit better than the one he'd worn to their first date. They wrote their own vows, which made Lily cry even though she pretended she had something in her eye. I promise to build a life with you, Ethan said. Not a perfect life, because that doesn't exist, but a real one. One where we show up for each other even when it's hard, where we choose each other every day. I promise to stay, Victoria said, her voice shaking. Even when I'm scared, even when I don't know what I'm doing. I promise to love you and Lily and this life we're building together. The officiant pronounced them married, and Ethan kissed his wife while Lily cheered and Marcus wolf whistled, and Jenna took approximately 700 photos. Afterward, they had dinner in the cabin. Nothing fancy, just food Jenna had helped prepare, and wine that Marcus had brought, and a cake Lily had insisted on decorating herself, which resulted in a lopsided monstrosity covered in too much frosting. It's perfect, Victoria said, cutting into it. It's a disaster, Lily replied cheerfully. Same thing. Later, after everyone had gone home and Lily had finally gone to bed, Ethan and Victoria sat on the porch wrapped in blankets. We're married, Victoria said, like she was testing the words. We are. I have a family. You do. That's terrifying. Why? Because I don't want to mess it up. I spent so long being alone that I don't know how to do this. How to be someone's wife. Someone's stepmom. How to be part of something bigger than myself. Ethan pulled her closer. You're already doing it. You've been doing it for months. But what if I fail? What if I wake up one day and realize I'm not cut out for this? Then we'll figure it out. Together. Victoria leaned her head against his shoulder. You make it sound so simple. It's not simple, but it's worth it. They sat in the cold, watching their breath fog in the air, and Victoria felt something settle inside her. Not certainty, because life didn't offer that, but something close, a sense of belonging she'd never had before. The months that followed were ordinary in the best way. Victoria's foundation grew, helping more businesses and employing more people. Ethan's woodworking commissions increased, and he hired an assistant to help with the workload. Lily thrived in school, made friends, joined the soccer team, and came home every day with stories that made them laugh. There were hard moments, too. Days when Victoria struggled with anxiety about whether she'd made the right choice leaving her company. Days when Ethan worried about money or Lily's future or whether he was doing enough. Days when all three of them were tired and cranky and snapped at each other over nothing. But those days passed. They always did. And the good days outnumbered them. One evening in early spring, almost 2 years after Victoria had first shown up at the cabin, Lily came into the kitchen while Ethan and Victoria were making dinner. "I have a question," she said. "Shoot," Ethan said. "Can I call Victoria Mom?" The kitchen went quiet. Victoria froze, a cutting board in her hands. Ethan looked at his daughter, then at his wife. "Where's this coming from?" he asked gently. "Everyone at school talks about their moms, and I used to say I didn't have one because mine died, but now I do have one. I have Victoria, and it feels weird to call her Victoria when she's my mom." Victoria set down the cutting board. Her hands were shaking. "Lily, you don't have to call me that if you don't want to." "But I do want to. Is that okay?" "Yeah," Victoria said, her voice breaking. "It's more than okay." Duh. Lily beamed. "Cool. Mom, can you help me with my math homework after dinner?" "Of course." Lily ran off, already moving on to the next thing. But Victoria stood in the kitchen, tears streaming down her face, and Ethan wrapped his arms around her while she cried. "I didn't think I'd ever be someone's mom," she said into his chest. "You are now," said into. "Mom, I don't want to screw it up." "You won't. You don't know that. I know you, and I know Lily, and I know you're going to be great." Victoria pulled back enough to look at him. "How do you always know the right thing to say?" "I don't. I just know you." She kissed him, and Ethan thought about how far they'd both come. How the broken, grieving widower who'd gone on a blind date to appease his friends had found something he never expected. How the exhausted, lost billionaire who'd shown up at his door had built a life she never thought she'd want. They weren't perfect. Their life wasn't perfect. But it was real. And it was theirs. A few weeks later, Victoria was working late at the foundation office when she got an unexpected email. It was from a reporter at a business magazine asking for an interview about her life after Nextech. She almost deleted it. She'd turned down dozens of similar requests over the past 2 years, unwilling to revisit that part of her life. But something about this one made her pause. Maybe it was the timing. Maybe it was the fact that she'd finally made peace with what she'd lost. Or maybe it was because she realized her story might help someone else who was stuck in the same trap she'd been in. She called Ethan. "There's a reporter who wants to interview me," she said. "About what?" "Leaving Nextech. Building a different life. That whole thing." "You gonna do it?" "I don't know. Part of me wants to, but part of me thinks it'll just dredge up everything I've worked so hard to move past." "What's your gut telling you?" Victoria thought about it. "That maybe it's time to stop running from it. That maybe telling the story will help me close that chapter for good. Then do it." Well, she did the interview a week later. The reporter was respectful, asking thoughtful questions about her decision to leave, what she'd learned, what her life looked like now. Victoria answered honestly, holding nothing back. "I spent my 20s building an empire," she told the reporter, "and it nearly destroyed me. I thought success meant sacrificing everything else, my health, my relationships, my happiness. And for a long time I believed that trade-off was worth it." "What changed?" the reporter asked. "I met someone who showed me what a real life looked like, who didn't care about my company or my money or my reputation, who just wanted me to be happy. And I realized that all the success in the world doesn't matter if you're miserable." Do you regret leaving? Victoria considered the question. "Sometimes. There are moments when I miss the thrill of closing a big deal or launching a new product. But those moments pass, and then I go home to my family, and I remember why I left." What would you say to someone who's in the position you were in? Someone who's successful but unhappy? I'd tell them that walking away doesn't make you a failure. It makes you honest, and that building a life that makes you happy is just as valid as building a business that makes you wealthy. Maybe more so. The article came out a month later. It was thoughtful and fair, and it didn't sensationalize her story. Victoria read it once, felt a strange sense of closure, and then moved on. But the article had an impact she hadn't anticipated. She started getting emails from people who'd read it, other CEOs who were burned out and considering walking away, young professionals who were questioning whether the career they'd chosen was worth the cost, parents who felt guilty for prioritizing work over family. She answered every single one. Not with advice, because she didn't have all the answers, but with her story. With the honesty that maybe success wasn't one size fits all. That it was okay to change your mind, to choose differently, to build something smaller and more meaningful instead of chasing something bigger and more impressive. One email stood out. It was from a woman in her 30s who'd just resigned from a high-powered law firm. "I don't know what I'm doing," the woman wrote, "but reading your story made me realize I don't have to have it all figured out. I just have to start. Thank you for being honest about how hard it is." Victoria showed the email to Ethan that night. "You're helping people," he said. "I'm just telling the truth. That's helping people." Victoria thought about that, about how her biggest failure had somehow become the thing that mattered most, about how walking away from everything she'd built had led her to build something better. That summer, on Lily's 10th birthday, they threw a party in the backyard. Kids ran through the sprinklers while adults clustered on the porch with drinks and conversation. Marcus and Jenna were there, along with half of Lily's class, and what felt like the entire town. Victoria stood at the edge of the chaos, watching Lily laugh with her friends, and felt Ethan's arm slip around her waist. "Good party," he said. "Lily's having fun. So are you." "Am I?" "You're smiling. That's usually a good sign." Victoria leaned into him. "I am happy. I didn't think I could be, but I am." "Good." They stood there watching their daughter, and Victoria thought about how different her life was from what she'd imagined. She'd thought success meant corner offices and board meetings and seeing your company's stock price climb. She'd thought happiness was something you earned after you'd achieved enough. But standing in her backyard, surrounded by people who loved her for who she was instead of what she'd accomplished, Victoria realized she'd been wrong about everything. Real success wasn't about building an empire. It was about building a life you didn't want to escape from. It was about finding people who saw you at your worst and chose to stay anyway. It was about letting go of the things that were killing you and holding on to the things that made you feel alive. And happiness wasn't something you earned. It was something you chose, every single day. Later that night, after the guests had left and Lily had crashed in a sugar-induced coma, Ethan and Victoria cleaned up the backyard. "This was a good day," Victoria said. "Yeah, it was. I keep thinking about where I was 2 years ago, how lost I was, how convinced I was that I'd never figure it out. And now? Now I think maybe being lost isn't the worst thing. Maybe it's just the thing that happens before you find where you're supposed to be." Ethan stopped what he was doing and looked at her. "You think this is where you're supposed to be?" "Yeah, I really do." He kissed her, soft and unhurried, and Victoria felt the last piece of her old life fall away. She wasn't the CEO anymore. She wasn't the billionaire or the public figure or the person everyone expected her to be. She was just Victoria, a woman who'd walked away from everything to find herself, who'd learned that strength wasn't about never breaking, it was about putting yourself back together after you did, who'd discovered that the best things in life weren't the ones you built alone, but the ones you built with people who loved you. And for the first time in her life, that was enough, more than enough. It was everything.